going to talk about price. We said that the marketing mix contains the 4 P's. And one of the 4 P's is price. And of course, there's also place, promotion, and product. Those are the other 3 P's. But today we're going to focus our attention on price and how that's going to impact our ability to be successful as marketers. Remember the first day we talked about value. And we said, what is value? You remember why we talked about that? Because we said that marketing, in essence, we said that marketing is about creating, communicating, and delivering value. So from 30,000 feet, that's what marketing is. And then there's tons of information about marketing that disseminates from that. But in essence, marketing is about creating, communicating, and delivering value. So then we say, well, what is value? And we said that value is a function of several things. Value is a function of price, quality, features, benefits. Those are all aspects of value. So today we're going to talk about the pricing element. Now, as business people and as marketers, we're trying to make a profit. So we want our organization to be profitable. Do you agree? What do you think? Is being profitable a worthwhile objective? So we need to understand what price, in most cases we're trying to figure out what price we should charge in order for us to be profitable. Now that's not always an objective. We're going to talk about some of the different pricing objectives. One of them is profit. Sometimes it's sales, sometimes it's market share, sometimes our objective is social responsibility. But we need to first start with understanding how it is we determine what our profit is. So before we could get to profit, we need to determine what our total revenue is going to be at a given price. Because we have a choice. We could price our product at $10. We could price our product at $20, $30, $40, $50, $60, or $29.99, $39.99. So whether we use that odd even pricing or a whole dollar amount, we still need to determine what price we're going to charge. So the first thing we need to do is figure out at a given price what our total revenue is going to be. So how much sales are we going to generate at a given price? How are we going to determine that? How do we determine what our total revenue is going to be? Well, in order to calculate our total revenue, what we do is we multiply price by quantity. So does that make sense? So at a given price, let's say $20. If at $20 we sell 1,000 units, then our total revenue is $20,000. Does that make sense? Just like if you go to the store and you purchase something, for us as consumers, that's our cost. Right? For us, it's our cost. What we're talking about here now as a business is the price that we're going to sell our product. So at a given price, we want to know what our total revenue is going to be, what our total sales are going to be. So in order to figure that out, we know one item we sell for $20, and if we sell 1,000, then 20 times 1,000 means that we're going to have total revenue of $20,000. Is that a good way to figure out what our total sales are going to be? Our total revenue? Does that make sense? Or is there another way to do it? Right, we're just trying to figure out how much our sales are going to be. But it's not enough to have sales. We want to have profit. So the next thing that we need to understand is what our costs are. So this big minus sign means that from our revenue, we have to subtract our cost. And we have variable costs, and we have fixed costs. So remember, part of this price that we're charging, right, that's not all profit. So if we sell it at $20, part of that $20 we have to use to cover our costs. Is that right? So we need to figure out what our costs are. Now, just like we have total revenue, we have total costs. Good. Right, so variable costs are costs that, tell us, Erica? Right, they're going to vary with the level of activity. So variable costs are costs that are, of course, variable, but importantly, they vary with the production volume. So the more units that we produce, the more units that we sell, the greater our variable cost. So an example of variable costs would be the materials that we use to make the product. Whether we make the product out of plastic or gold, whatever it is that we make the product out of, the more units that we make, the greater our variable cost, our total variable cost. Because we could also look at the variable cost per unit, which is the unit variable cost. But right now we're talking about the total cost. So in other words, the cost for the plastic might be, let's say, 50 cents per unit. So the more units that we make, the greater the variable cost. So in this case, if we make and sell 1,000 units, then the variable cost is going to be how much? The total variable cost is going to be $500. But the unit variable cost is 50 cents. But what we're focusing on here is the total cost, the total variable cost, and the total fixed cost. Because what we're trying to understand is how much is our profit. So if that's our total revenue, we need to subtract our total cost. So we have variable cost, right? We're looking at cost behavior. So total cost is comprised of variable cost and fixed cost. Fixed costs are those costs that are not going to change with the production volume. So within a given range. So if we make and sell 1,000 units or 10,000 units, our fixed costs, our total fixed costs are going to be the same. What would be an example of a fixed cost that we might have as an organization? So, rent, insurance,
Office.
the space for the office,
Well, your personnel in the back office, perhaps.
well, we got a number of different inputs here. First up, let's talk about the first couple. So, for example, the rent. The rent that we're paying for our manufacturing facility, or the mortgage, or whatever it is that we're paying, that amount that we pay every month, doesn't change based on the number of units that we make and sell. That's going to be the same within a given range. Why do I say that? Because maybe when we reach 500,000 units, we have to have a bigger factory. But within a given range, those costs are fixed. So we could make 200,000 units, our rent is still going to be the same. Our insurance is still going to be the same. Our real estate tax is still going to be the same. Although we might reach a point where our insurance is going to go up. Why? Because the insurance company might feel that we've reached or exceeded a given range where they feel they have more risk. So the amount that we pay for insurance, the premium that we pay, is going to increase. So that doesn't mean that the cost is not fixed. Yes, it's fixed up until a given point. So once we start making over 1 million units, they might say, we didn't sign up for that. You told us you were going to make 200,000 units per year. Now you're making 1 million units per year. It's more likely that there's going to be a claim against the policy. So we're going to increase your premium. You're going to have to pay more. But other than that exception, right, other than that scenario, our costs are fixed in those examples. Now, we have some costs that are considered to be manufacturing costs, and we refer to those as product costs, and non-manufacturing costs that we refer to as period costs. So we have costs that are manufacturing costs and non-manufacturing costs. Those can also be fixed or variable. Are we good? So we could have costs that are either the result of our manufacturing operations or not a direct result of our manufacturing operations. Why do I mention that? Because some of the examples that we started to get were what we call period costs, like advertising, or the office space for the salespeople. Those are non-manufacturing costs. Those are period costs. Now you might say, well, what about electricity? Well, it depends. Why does it depend? Because if it's electricity that we use in the manufacturing facility to make the product, then it's a product cost. But if it's the electricity in the headquarters of the company or in the sales office, that's a non-manufacturing cost. So in accounting, we make that distinction. And it's an important one. So those costs can be both variable and fixed. So we're trying to understand our total cost. Why? Because we want to make a profit as an organization. So we need to know what our total revenue is and what our total costs are. So when we subtract from our total revenue, our total cost, that's going to tell us our profit. Questions about that? So remember, when we talk about total cost, you have to make sure to capture both the variable cost and the fixed cost. What we have here is total fixed cost and total variable cost. So we're not talking about the unit variable cost. If we didn't know what the total variable cost is, the way that we would find that out is by multiplying the quantity times the unit variable cost. Question? No? Now there was a question on the quiz about marginal revenue, marginal cost. Who knows what that is? Why do we talk about marginal cost? When we look at cost, we want to understand how much it's going to cost us to make and sell one more unit. You see why that's important? And we need to do a marginal analysis. We need to understand what does it cost to make one more unit, and also what is the marginal revenue? So what is the revenue that we're going to generate from selling one more unit? That's what that question on the quiz is addressing. Is if we sell one more unit, what is the additional cost going to be? And in order to find out the additional cost, we need to know what the variable costs are and what the fixed costs are. And in that example, they tell us what the variable costs are and what the fixed costs are. The reason why we talk about the cost and place such an emphasis on identifying the variable cost and the fixed cost is because we want to make sure that we're capturing all of our costs, whether they're manufacturing costs or non-manufacturing costs, because ultimately we want to make a profit. Generally, that's one of the major pricing objectives. So we need to understand which costs are going to vary with the production volume. That's the variable cost. And which costs don't vary with the production volume. Those are the fixed costs. So it's common for an organization to have as a pricing objective profit. Very common. But it's not quite that simple. There's other pricing objectives, and those objectives are subject to certain constraints that we're going to talk about in a moment. And we also need to understand price elasticity of demand. We need to understand how price sensitive the market is. So a market that's elastic is going to have a price elasticity of demand that's greater than 1. Inelastic is less than 1. And unitary is going to be equal to 1. Now, so what does that mean? So an elastic market is a market that's price sensitive. It means that if we lower the price, that demand is going to go up. Does that seem reasonable? That's for us as consumers, that's very commonplace. That's why from a marketing perspective, sales and promotions are so successful. Because in those markets, whether it's clothing or food, when the price goes down, the demand increases. And we can look at that on this demand curve. That's what this demand curve shows. So this demand curve shows, this downward sloping demand curve shows that at this price, this is going to be the quantity demanded. When we lower the price from P1 to P2, then this quantity is going to be demanded. What we're assuming there is that the only thing that's changing is the price. So in this case, our price is the only thing that's changing. Not the price of similar products, not the income of consumers. Those things are not changing. Consumer tastes and preferences are not changing. So the only thing that's changing is our price. That's what the demand curve is assuming. So we refer to that as movement along the demand curve. We just changed our price. Competitors, we're assuming, our assumption, an important assumption that we need to make is that the price of similar products is not changing. So we're assuming that the competition is not changing their price. We're assuming that income for the customers has not changed. Because if income changed, let's say if income increased, then they might buy more. Or if income decreased, they might buy less. But here we're saying, for the sake of this model, which we refer to as the demand curve, we're saying that their income didn't change, and their preferences haven't changed, and competitors haven't changed their prices. So we're just trying to understand what happens if we change our price in an elastic market. In an elastic market, one that's price sensitive, it says that a 1% decrease in price will result in a greater than 1% increase in demand. So if we lower price by 1%, demand will increase by greater than 1%. So isn't that what happens? I mean, this, I know it seems a little theoretical, but isn't this what we do in marketing all the time? So why do we lower the price 20%? Why does Macy's have these sales? Why do they lower the price of sweaters 20%? Because the expectation is that if you lower the price 20%, that demand is going to increase by more than 20%. And we're going to be more profitable. Isn't that what we see all the time? Look at any magazine, newspapers, we see sales all the time.
Isn't it true for demand decreases and the price rises that your total revenue would increase?
Say it again?
Isn't it true if the demand decreases and the prices increase, that your total revenue would?
Well, if we raise the price, our total revenue will increase.
Right.
But if we raise the price and our total revenue increases, in an elastic market, demand is going to decline. So you're right, so we have a choice. We're going to sell the product either at $20 or at $120. Well, if we sell it at $20, then we're a little bit ahead of ourselves, but that would be, we might consider in this scenario, a penetration pricing strategy, where we introduce the product at a low price. But we might introduce the product at a high price. We might introduce the product instead of at $20 at $120, and you're saying that the total revenue would be greater, which is true. But in an elastic market, the demand at $20 is going to be much greater than the demand at $120. Do you agree? So what happens if the iPad 3 was, or the iPhone 5, right? That's their latest release. So the iPhone 5 was selling now for $100. So without a contract, the iPhone 5 is selling for what, $700? For the 64 gigabyte version? So, and if you have a contract with AT&T, it's still $400. And they're saying that they expect to sell, well, they expected that they were going to sell in the first 2 weeks 10 million! 10 million at that price. So let's say even with a contract, so in other words, if you sign a 2-year contract, you could get the phone from AT&T for $400 for the one with the 64 gigabyte memory. What about if it was $100? Do you think we would have a greater demand? In this market, yeah, I think we would agree that's the case. But the point that you're raising is at the heart of our challenge. Do we charge $20 or do we charge $120? But in an elastic market, there's a trade-off. Total revenue, we would think, is going to be greater, but the number of units that we're going to sell is going to be less. That's what we need to decide. That's our challenge. Do we introduce the product at $20 as part of a penetration pricing approach? Or do we introduce the product at $120 and then lower the price over time? We said last time that's known as skimming. We introduce the product at a high price with the expectation that there's some innovators out there, maybe it's only 3% of the category, that are going to purchase the product at that price. And we made some other key points. What? That at that high price, that we wouldn't attract competitors. And what else? Because remember, we said that if we're selling it at $120, right now we said we have a choice. We could sell it at $120 or $20. Now at $120, we're trying to recoup some of our investment. We might have spent 5 years researching and developing this new product. But what if at $120, we attract a lot of competitors? You know, remember last time we talked about the fact that, well, sure, other companies are going to be looking and saying, $120? We could make that product for $8 and sell it for $50. So that's one of the things that we need to consider if we're going to adopt a skimming strategy, a skimming approach to pricing. So there's got to be a demand at that price. So at least, remember the adoption curve model suggests that the innovators could represent about 3% of the category. And also we need to consider the level of newness of the product. So how new is the product? What stage in the product life cycle is it? That's going to determine our pricing approach. Is it introduction? Is it growth? The skimming is very common in some categories, especially electronics, in the introduction stage of the product life cycle. Questions?
What about, like, continuing the example of they, since I have the car and they also send me this coupon that says these 20% off every month or every 2 months. So they are, does that mean that they're able to keep up in the elastic and inelastic market? Because after, the coupons are just for a month or 2 weeks, and after that, the price is very low.
Well, they could decide to have a promotion for a given period of time. When we talk about elastic and inelastic, it has to do with how the customer is going to respond to our pricing approach. So we said that an elastic market is one that's price sensitive. So if we lower the price, demand is going to go up. But inelastic is one that's not price sensitive, which suggests that if we lower the price, then demand is going to increase. Like, let's say we lower the price 1%, demand will increase by an amount less than 1%. Can you think of some examples of some products that you think are not price sensitive? Right, now keep in mind that for person to person, this is going to vary. There's some products that, for me, I'm not price sensitive. Maybe for you, they are. But we're making a generalization. We're making an assumption. Go ahead.
Water.
What is it?
Water.
Water? So tell us. You think that water is an inelastic market?
Yeah.
So if you lower the price, then you think that the demand won't increase.
Well, but if you increase the price, there's still going to be the same demand for it.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So you're saying that if we increase the price of water, that consumption won't decrease. What do you guys think?
And then what about bottled or about regular tap?
Okay, so if it's making a distinction now between if it's from your faucet or if it's the price of Aquafina. So if we lower the price of Aquafina, or and what you're saying is if we increase the price of Aquafina, that you think that demand is not going to decrease.
There's no increase. I'm talking about tap water. Like water.
Okay. What else? Any other examples? Yeah, Stephen? Gasoline. Yes, this is an interesting one. So explain that to us. So you think that gasoline is inelastic? The market for gasoline?
Yes.
All right, so tell us why you say that.
Because people gotta go fast and they need gasoline to do it. So, you know, you're commuting to work and gas is $4 a gallon, and you'll be like, well, shit, that sucks. But if it's $2 a gallon, and you're like, well, it's great. Either way, you're going to work.
Really, just like that.
Just like
All
that.
right, we got that as a quote from Stephen.
And that's not verbatim from the book.
Yeah, I remember seeing that. So, what Stephen is suggesting is that if you drive to work, if you have a car and you need to drive to work, then when the price of gasoline goes from $3 to $3.25 to $3.50 to $3.75 to $4 to $4.50, that demand is not going to decrease, which I think is plausible in some cases. Now, that's not everybody. Now, we know definitely when gasoline hits a certain price, let's say $4.50, some people are going to say, I'm going to take the train, or I'm going to take the bus, or I'm going to carpool. But there's those that are more dependent on their car. Maybe for them that's not an option. So you could argue that gasoline, when the price of gasoline increases, that the demand for gasoline is not going to significantly decline. So in some cases, that definitely could be true. Yeah.
What about cigarettes? When prices go up for cigarettes, people are saying they can stop smoking, they still smoking.
Yeah, so the excise tax, that's, a common argument is they keep raising the price with the thought that at a higher price, the consumption of cigarettes will decline. But it's $10 a pack now. I remember, and maybe I shouldn't admit this openly, but when cigarettes were $1.50 a pack, now it's $10. Like, that's crazy. Have people stopped smoking because of that? So that's one of the arguments, the counter arguments against that tax. And also with the soda tax. So if there's a soda tax, are kids going to stop drinking soda? No, they're just don't get the chips instead. So if you get chips in a soda, now what are you going to do? Well, you're just going to get the soda and not the chips. Or maybe your parents are going to have to increase your allowance. Medicine, absolutely. So if you're taking, let's say, for example, heart medication or medicine for allergies, whatever it is, diabetes, if they increase the price of the medication 10% or 20%, the demand is not going to decrease. You need your heart medication. You're not going to stop taking your medication and say, wait a minute, it's an elastic market. Well, no, I don't think so. Now your doctor might prescribe a generic, but maybe there is no generic. Right, Edward?
On that same note, healthcare costs?
Healthcare costs?
Doctors, other stuff, like going to doctors, for instance, surgeries.
Oh, going to doctors? Yeah. I think healthcare costs would be more elastic, because as we see, there's about 50 million Americans that don't have healthcare. Why? Because the price is too high. Their employer is not providing it. In fact, it is so high that a lot of employers are not providing healthcare, and so less people are getting health insurance. But yeah, going to the doctor for a surgery. So if the doctor says, I told you it was going to be $15,000 for the surgery, but now it's $20,000. What are you going to say? That's it! The deal is off! So yeah, there's certain things that we need, and we're not going to be price sensitive. So the demand is not going to increase when the price goes down. What about, for example, think about some products that we just have more than enough. Like, let's say salt. How much salt do you need? So when they have a sale in the store and they say 50% off on salt, you're like, I have 10 boxes in my pantry already. So different products have different levels of sensitivity to changes in price. And again, it's going to vary from person to person. For Joy, she might say, I need salt. Now I'm going to buy it. Now, 50% off, now I'm going to buy. Melina says, but I have enough.
What about the MTA? Even if they what are they doing?
Yeah, and they know that too, right? So, if they raise the fare, then is the number of people that are riding the trains going to decrease? Doesn't seem like it. So that would be an example of inelastic market. Yeah,
It would
Mike?
be like toilet paper. Everybody uses it, so if the price increases, people are still gonna buy it.
Yeah, they might. For some people, if the price increases, they'll continue to buy that particular product, or they might look for another item or another brand that's less expensive.
Premium goods like expensive cars and other expensive stuff.
Yeah, so if you're going to get a Rolls Royce and they raise the price 10%, well, how much is that going to impact demand? So before it was $300,000, now they tell you it's $325,000. So what do? Cancel the order? So you already were going to spend $300,000. What's another $25,000 for Edward, right? Because Edward's a shot caller. But again, keep in mind it varies, it's going to vary somewhat from person to person, but we could still make some generalizations about the price elasticity of demand. So we said that some markets are more price sensitive than others. That means that when we lower the price, we may not see an increase or a significant increase in demand. In some cases, the percentage decrease in price will result in an equal percentage increase in demand. Yeah, no, Henry?
So when we're talking about elastic and inelastic market, the examples that we have heard are about certain products and certain brands, not the market, right? So does that apply to the market or to the brands?
Well, we're assuming that based on the examples that we heard, that applies to that particular market. So that's the way I interpreted those suggestions, is that we're talking about the market for bottled water, or we're talking about the market for prescription medications.
It'd also be for both, because I mean, if you have a top brand of a specific market, either way, no matter how much the price increase, people would still think it's a top brand. Still.
Well, that's why we care. So we're going from general to specific, is you want to understand the price elasticity of demand for a given market. Why? Because we have a particular branded product. And so we're trying to understand and determine what happens if we charge a particular price. So our product, our branded product in that particular category, is something that we want to promote. So we want to understand, if we reduce the price 20%, is there going to be an increase in sales? Because of what you suggested, right? What if I lower the price 20% and demand doesn't increase? Oh boy, now we got a problem. Why?
You have to think that there's substitutes out there. There's two different brands of the same thing. If you increase the price too much, you might just say, well, forget that brand, I'll just go to the cheap.
Absolutely, that could happen, but you had told us before about the impact on total revenue. So you said that a higher price, total revenue would be higher, but I said, but demand might be lower.
Yeah.
So at a lower demand, total revenue more than likely is not going to be higher. But in this situation, what we described in an inelastic market, if we lower the price 20% and demand does not increase by at least 20%, then our total revenue is going to drop dramatically. Do you see why that is? So the reason why we lower the price 20% in an inelastic market is because we feel that the increase in demand is going to compensate for that. So that we're going to be having revenue that's greater even at a lower price. So the total revenue is actually going to increase. And our total profit is also going to increase. Because even at a lower price, we're going to sell that many more units. So fine, we lowered the price 20%. But the number of units that we sold increased by 30%. So our total revenue is going to increase. But we need to understand, if it's in an elastic market and we just lower the price 20%, what did we do? Why did we do that? Now we're selling the same product, but at a lower price, and demand is the same, so we're going to be less profitable. Meaning they're not even be profitable at all. So that's why we need to understand the price elasticity of demand. How is the demand for a particular product going to change when we change the price? That's what this demand curve shows. This is just movement along the demand curve. Not a shift, just movement. Because we're assuming income has not changed. Price of competitors' products have not changed. The consumer preferences have not changed. Questions?
Under what circumstances would you lower the prices in an inelastic market?
What do you think? What would make sense? In an inelastic market, that means we're not going to sell more units, consumption is not going to increase. Would we lower the price?
Competition.
So competitors could try to introduce a comparable product at a lower price. And so one of the things, I don't know if we're going to get to it today, but when we talk about pricing approaches, we could talk about competition, loss leaders, customary pricing, above or below competitors. So in an inelastic market, even if lowering the price is not going to increase demand, we might need to do so because our competitors lower their price. But if we can differentiate ourselves, maybe we could still charge a premium. If we still have features and benefits in our product that differentiates ourselves from competitors, we could still charge more. It doesn't mean that every product in a given category is the same price. Remember we talked about good, better, best, and even premium pricing? So not everybody is going to be the economy brand. So there might be some products in the category that sell at $20. And ours might still be able to sell at $120. Because even though the functionality, the generic functionality is the same, we have more features and more benefits. But you're absolutely right. If we're positioned in the same place on the perceptual map, and we're going head to head with the competitors, and we're at $20 and they're at $20, and they lower the price to $15, then we're going to have to decide whether or not we're going to match their price. Why would they lower? Why do you think they would lower the price to $15?
Maybe they can afford it more than you.
Yeah, their cost structure might be lower than ours, so they might be able to lower the price. Maybe they've achieved economies of scale, and they're at a point where their costs are actually declining, or significantly decreased from where they were previously. Also, another reason that they might lower the price is they might be trying to steal our customers. So the total demand for the category may not change, but remember I said in a mature category, we're either going to grow the category, right? If we're going to see an increase, we're going to either grow the total category, or we're going to steal our customers, our competitors' customers. So they might lower the price to $15, even though the demand for the category is not going to increase, but they expect that they'll be able to steal our customers. So remember, we're talking about first general, the entire category, and then now we're getting to specific, right? So from the category as a whole to specific products and specific brands.
Items like in a market also change the inelastic demand because it's like, let's say flashlight and flash bulb, if the amount of the flash bulb increases, you would want to buy more flashlights. I don't know.
If the amount of the flash bulbs,
Like the price of flash bulbs go down, so you're like, okay, this is the time to buy a flashlight, so that can change the demand of something that wouldn't really.
oh, well, they're complementary products, products that are used together, and there's, in business-to-business marketing, we talk about a lot about derived demand. So the demand for flashlights could be impacted by the cost, a decrease in the cost of the bulbs. So if the price of the bulbs decrease, then the demand is going to increase, and then I think what you're suggesting is that the demand for flashlights would also increase.
Because something like an elastic, like really only do the demand for that really shift.
Yeah, so those complementary products, for example, you could say like tea bags and teapots. So what happens? If the demand for tea, the price for tea decreases dramatically, then you might see a significant increase in the demand for teapots. Now all of a sudden everybody's buying teapots. Why? Because the price of tea might have declined 50%. So people are going to drink more tea. All right, so let's, are we good? All right. I didn't blow your mind? You're good, right? So you know how to calculate profit? You understand the impact of the price elasticity of demand in a given category and for specific products and brands. Because ultimately, this is helpful to us because we need to decide what price we're going to charge. So if we don't understand the price elasticity of demand, then how are we going to decide what price to charge? If we don't understand our costs, then how are we going to be able to make a profit? So one of the pricing objectives we said is profit. Well, how can we achieve our objective if we don't know what our costs are? And if we don't know what our costs are, then we don't know what to charge. Because remember, we need to set a price that's going to cover our costs. So profit is one pricing objective. Now there's some others. What are some other pricing objectives? So when we're thinking about what price we're going to charge, there's an objective that we have in mind. Certainly, one of the most common is that we want to charge enough, we want to set a price that's going to cover our costs so that we could be profitable. All right, that makes sense. We're just talking about profit. What else? What else would be a pricing objective? So the dollar sales. Now, you see, then it gets a little bit more complicated. Because if we want to maximize the total dollar sales, one or two things really has to happen. Either we're going to have to charge a higher price, or we're going to charge a lower price but sell a lot more units. So here we're talking about the dollar sales. We could also look at the unit sales. Now you see why these two can be somewhat conflicting? The dollar sales and the unit sales. Why is that? If our objective is to sell as many units as possible in an elastic market, what does that mean? So Melina says we're going to lower the price. So if our objective is to sell 1 million units, well, we know how to do that in an elastic market, so we lower the price. Now when we lower the price, then we'd like to think that our total revenue is going to increase, but maybe not as much as we would have liked, and maybe we're not going to be as profitable. So if we just look at unit sales and say, our objective is to sell 1 million units. So that's simple, right? Just set a low price. And in an elastic market, a lot of people are going to buy. But that doesn't mean we're going to be profitable. Sure, at $50, how many iPhone 5s do you think we're going to sell? 500 million? So, that being said, companies do set targets in terms of the number of units they want to sell, but what I'm trying to show you is it's not so simple when we think about setting the price. Look at all the things that we need to consider. We don't just say, oh, we're going to charge $20. Well, how do you know that $20 is the right price? Are we going to cover our fixed and variable costs? And at $20, how many units are we going to sell? Why is the units important? Think about fixed costs. Why is the number of units that we sell important? Go ahead, Yana.
Because, I said, you have a certain amount of price attached to it, so it has a cost, and then if you have a set amount of units that you want to sell, then you have to have an idea of a set amount of unit pricing, because it's all going to cost you.
So there's a total fixed cost. Now what happens, what do we do with our total fixed cost? In accounting, we talk about fixed cost absorption. So what that means is that the more units that we make and sell, the smaller the amount each unit is going to have to absorb. So what do we do with that $100,000 in fixed cost? Well, that $100,000, each unit is going to absorb an amount, a certain amount. So the more units that you produce and sell, the smaller that amount per unit. So instead of selling 20,000 units, we sell 100,000 units, then each unit is going to absorb a smaller amount of the fixed cost. That's why some companies, they are looking for this incremental volume, even though they may not even be covering their marginal costs. So some companies understand that the more units that they're producing, the smaller amount of fixed cost each unit is going to absorb. So they're spreading those fixed costs over a greater number of units. And in fact, it's so prevalent that countries around the world have banned companies from doing that. It's known as dumping. So what do? They produce 1 million units and they sell it below cost in a particular market. So governments, they don't want that. You're trying to optimize your manufacturing facility, but you're going to destroy our domestic business. So dumping is illegal. What else? What about market share? Remember a few weeks ago we talked about market share. So market share says what percentage of the total category is branded with our brand. So what percentage of the products in a given category carry our brand name? And we can look at market share in terms of dollars and also in terms of units. So what percentage of the units in a given category are our brand versus competitors? So remember we had talked about soda and I said, well, was it probably orange juice, right? I said, you might feel happy that you sold 50,000 gallons of orange juice. You say, we did a good job. Right, Nyala? We did a good job. We sold 50,000 gallons of orange juice. But then, we find out that our competitor sold 450,000 gallons of orange juice. So if our competitors sold 450,000 gallons of orange juice, and we sold 50,000, that means our market share is only 10%. So the total market is 500,000 gallons. We sold 50,000. That means our market share is 10%. So one of our pricing objectives could be to achieve a market share of 10% or 20% or 25% or 28%, that could be what drives our decision to set a certain price. So we need to have pricing objectives. That's going to help define the price that we choose. So if it's just the number of units, now remember, when we look at market share, we look at both. We can calculate the market share in terms of dollars and in terms of units. So if you're looking at products in a given category, some that are $20 and some that are $120, the market share in terms of dollars, we could expect to be much higher for those that sell their product at $120. But in terms of units, you're probably going to be surprised to see that their unit share is going to be much lower. So take, for example, vodka. So if you look at market share of vodka, well, of course, wouldn't you think in terms of dollars that Grey Goose would have a greater percentage of the dollar market share than Smirnoff? Why? Because a bottle of Grey Goose is $35, a bottle of Smirnoff is $5. So I don't hear any objections, so that means that the pricing is correct, right? But in terms of units, at $5, they sell a lot more vodka. They sell a lot more bottles of vodka. So our market share could be in terms of dollars. Our market share objective could be in terms of units. And another objective might be, before I mentioned social responsibility. So for example, before you guys mentioned prescription medication. So our objective, our pricing objective, may not be about profit. It may not be about the number of units, the dollar sales, the market share. It might be that our pricing objective is what? To make sure that all low-income users of heart medication have access to their monthly supply. So what does that mean? That means, in other words, that it's affordable. So we're not talking about making a profit. We want to make sure that people that have low incomes can get their medication, not for $150 a month, but for $15 a month. So our pricing objectives are, how do you come up with $15 for a month's supply of this heart medication? Are we going to be profitable? Are we going to increase our market share? Are we going to increase the number of units sold? No. We set the price so at an amount that it's affordable for low-income households. So that might be our pricing objective. So think about that when we say, how do we decide what price to charge? Well, it could be to make the most sales, the most total revenue, or to be profitable, to maximize our profits. So we're going to set it at such a price, not $20, but maybe $19.50, so that we could make as much profit, our total revenue is as high as possible. That could be what we try to do. Or it could be that none of that matters to us. Our pricing objective, we're going to set the price so that everybody who needs heart medication is going to be able to afford it.
How about like environmentally friendly? Like you would make the price higher if you say locally grown and environmentally friendly than something that isn't. Would that go into that category?
As far as social responsibility?
Yeah.
So that's going to increase our cost. That might be part of our core values. And if anything, usually we're able to charge a premium for that by saying that our product is environmentally safe or adheres to fair trade practices.
The same as prestige pricing.
Prestige pricing, which we'll talk about next time, is one of the pricing approaches. Prestige pricing means that we charge a higher price because we believe that that enhances the perceived value. So why is the product desirable? Because it's expensive, right, in part. So we charge more, we charge a higher price, because at a higher price, the product garners prestige. Right? Do you really think, how much more does it cost to make a Rolls Royce? The problem is that their manufacturing process has to be different than for cars that are $20,000 because of the quantity that's demanded.
Does that apply to organic foods and stuff like that? Or is that just their cost that comes out of it?
Oh, you're saying it's like organic foods, a type of prestige pricing?
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that, I wouldn't describe it that way. You're charging a premium, you differentiate your product, and you charge more for it. Prestige pricing has to do with the fact that, like with luxury items, generally luxury items would be considered as using a type of prestige pricing. Because the fact that your Ferragamo bag or your Prada bag is that expensive, it makes it desirable.